Armed with this new wisdom, the math was finally mathing, and contradictions between the disciplines were starting to fall away. It must have given him the confirmation he needed from the universe to keep going. He kept following one thread after another until his theory of special relativity was fully formed. Not only does this theory introduce us to the concept of space-time and the mind-bending reality of time moving with light, but a natural consequence was his most famous equation, E equals mc squared, which he didn't even seek to understand, it just came out of the theory. In that same year, he keeps going, and his other papers help us establish that atoms are a thing and introduce us to the idea of light quanta, so he can justifiably be regarded as the intellectual originator of quantum theory. When it came to seeing what was so imperceivable, eventually he came to be sure. He said, "I no longer ask whether these quanta really exist, nor do I try to construct them any longer, for I now know that my brain cannot get through in this way, but I rummage through the consequences as carefully as possible, so as to learn about the range of applicability of this conception." This gives us amazing insight into the unique way in which his mind was now functioning. Step by step, truth after new truth, it was plain for Einstein to see how limited knowledge really is. According to him, Fantasie ist wichtiger als Wissen, denn Wissen ist begrenzt, meaning imagination is more important than knowledge. Knowledge is limited. This is ultimately what is required of anyone on a quest of existential truth. Be it the truth of God's laws, or the truth of one's purpose on earth. What happens when we decide to 1. Remove any doubts clouding our mind. 2. Surrender to the only things we absolutely know to be true. And 3. Move forward from a place of uncertainty. What happens is, we gain the certainty that we can face any challenge, no matter how great. This is what happened to Albert, and this is why he was such a force to be reckoned with. A free thinker that proved you can move forward, armed with nothing but trust in the universe and the power of light. Thanks to him, our current time is filled with so much knowledge, and so many facts about the universe that it is hard not to dream of black holes, parallel universes, and what it's like to travel at the speed of light. But what is still missing in our time is the courage to surrender to the mysteries of the unknown. One also has to be bold enough to surrender to these higher powers without needing instant gratification. You see, after Einstein's miracle year, he expected feedback to come, but none did, neither positive nor negative. He went back to his normal daily grind, but he was motivated now more than ever to find a theory of everything. It must have been challenging that the response took years to come, and in the interim he submitted a thesis for his doctorate, but it was not about the special theory of relativity. His professors would have deemed that too speculative. And while they did give him his doctorate, their only comment was, "Proof that he is capable of working successfully on scientific problems." Imagine living in this daily reality where you now have access to so much truth and no one but you really gets it. They don't even see the point in your work. In fact, when Einstein started on his general theory, he was dissuaded by Max Planck, who said, "As an old friend, I have to talk you out of doing this because you will not succeed if you do. No one will believe you." Einstein reacted to this challenge with an added surge of determination, and over the next 12 years, in many mistakes and many debates with the greats later, he had given the totality of space-time and matter a structure. Finally, the tides were turning, and his colleagues were now realizing that this man was actually someone to take very seriously. His haters had turned into believers. He was now at the top of the scientific leaderboard, rubbing shoulders with the best of the best. and universities from every country were competing against each other for a chance to hear him lecture in person. Einstein's career not only united mechanics and electrodynamics, mass and energy, space and time, gravitation and space-time, and ultimately all theories in a world formula, but also united researchers of all countries. Once the news of his achievements spread to the mass media in 1919, Albert went from a comfortable professor living in Berlin to a global superstar. It seemed like everyone was obsessed with the 40-year-old genius that opened their eyes to the unseeable. His growing celebrity gave him bigger and bigger stages to share his theories about the universe, and eventually people wanted to know his views on all kinds of topics, from science to philosophy to religion to war. Einstein always spoke the truth. This was his obsession since childhood, to share what he knew and encourage collaboration to fill the gaps. This was his approach for discovering the theory of everything, and so naturally his honesty and spirit of unity eventually got him into trouble with the Nazis. It was inevitable that these two forces would clash, one on a quest for truth and the other for power. It's a classic tale of light versus dark, and we all know in the end who lost the fight, but unfortunately for Albert, he couldn't remain above it. His knowledge was so powerful, he was a direct threat to the rising institution in Germany, and he was forced to act. The vibe in the scientific community around Einstein changed. Slowly, he started to receive more critiques about his work that were making headlines in the newspapers. He fought back against his critics publicly, seeing them as just part of the pack of the people that hadn't caught up to his theories. However, this only made him a greater target. He realized that the negativity was more aggressive and more strategic when he witnessed a lecture in person that was intended to dispute his theories. Some of the things he heard said about him must have been so absurd. They called his work Jew science and claimed that Germany needed to be cleansed of his lies. He realized that no one there was listening for science. They were there to build on the ideas that they had read about in Hitler's book. The propaganda machine, which was the most important element of Hitler's rise to power, relied on these small gatherings, where Hitler and his allies knew no leader from the other political parties would ever go, so they could make up whatever they wanted based on what the crowd wanted to hear. They weren't aware that this curious and courageous person was witness to their ways, and though he left Europe for good on September 9th, 1933, he remained an activist for the rest of his life. He was motivated to rid the world of the stupidity, fear, and greed that he saw in a government that was slowly losing its grip on reality. Early in 1933, Hitler had finessed his way in as chancellor, put a bounty on Einstein's head, burned the parliament down, blamed the communists for it, and convinced the leaders of the right to join his efforts to suppress them in the name of public safety. In order to do so, he got a decree passed that suspended the secrecy of the post and telephone, the freedom of expression and of the press, the right to public assembly and the right of free association, as well as the protection of property and home. It also allowed the government to assume power over states and punish using the death penalty and arson, and was going to take effect immediately. This enabled the Nazis to have the socialists and communists hunted and arrested, and also suppress anyone attempting to expose them in the press. Hitler effectively uses the Nazis' willingness to use force and propaganda to eliminate political opposition, and the aggressive takeover creates a toxic atmosphere in the government. Anyone opposing Hitler was afraid to reject his ideas publicly, and the Enabling Act of 1933, which essentially gives him permission to take all human rights away from the citizens of Germany without needing consent from Parliament, was signed into law. The willingness politicians had to hand over power to the Nazis was a direct result of the fear Hitler instilled and this propaganda machine. As a result, the first concentration camps were created, and by April 1st, 1933, Nazis had shifted their focus from a purely political angle to a religious one. By now, Einstein was 54. He had already achieved so much in his early life, including a Nobel Prize and celebrity status, such that he could do whatever he wanted. But he couldn't rest while witnessing that his new home in the United States was full of the same issues that were now tearing apart Europe during World War II. It had racism, anti-Semitism, minorities being treated as inferior, and added to that, a military that was willing to use a lot of force to assert the nation's power in the world. He saw a pattern of darkness in our entire society that was a threat to the freedom to pursue the truth, which he saw ultimately as a threat to world peace. He said, "Dear posterity, if you have not become more just, more peaceful, and generally more rational than we are or were, why then the devil take you. Having with all respect given utterance to this pious wish, I am or was yours, Albert Einstein." Einstein continued the work until his last days on Earth in April 1955. And although he didn't get to see his vision of a theory of everything manifest, he left the world satisfied and never lost his childlike spirit. I think that's what truly made him brave and unrelenting in a world filled with fear. He never abandoned his inner child despite the seriousness of the land he was born in and the constant violence plaguing all great nations. He moved through the world as a child would, in a constant state of wonder, flowing from one country to the next, and passionately focused on that which made him happy. His activism was also born out of this instinctive notion of the difference between right and wrong. And while many thought him so, he was not naive. He was just different. And this difference must have been lonely. He felt as a lone wolf, never wholeheartedly belonging to the state, my country, circle of friends, and not even to my family, constantly experiencing a feeling of strangeness and the need for solitude. A person with no roots anywhere, a stranger everywhere. As someone who has always beat to the beat of her own drum and gone wherever the wind took her, when I read those words, suddenly I didn't feel so alone anymore. So my friend, I hope this story inspires you as well, to keep walking on the path of your choosing, regardless of how dark it feels sometimes. Remember that your inner child holds the highest wisdom, and your capacity for imagination is what will light your path forward.